college would vary on that, so I don't think
That's
there.
why I was wondering if it's like
Yeah,
a
I don't
thing
think
that-
any assurance is made that there would be some waiver of a requirement of world language when you arrived at your college.
So it's just like an extra something, like an extra test you could take, or
Attaboy. It's an attaboy.
just
Get a pretty
say you're good at this
certificate.
language. I'm just curious as to, and it, I mean, it doesn't impact anyone really, except for the kids.
The state's been offering it, I think, 2 or 3 years, and Ms. Stotler was cautious to say she waited for other districts to try it out and see how it's going, to see if it was worth getting involved in. And it seems like the feedback is good, and the students in the districts where they're offering this have been successful in completing, because you have to administer a test in order for the students to be able to demonstrate proficiency. And so that requires probably, I don't think we've worked out all the details, but probably a Saturday morning and, some proctoring of the test for the students that would be sitting for it.
And it says in this,
Yeah.
that the kids pay for it themselves.
Yes, I'm sorry, that is true. There would be,
So
you
they-
would,
they
just like if
pay.
you were paying for any other test that a student might take outside of school, yes.
And would this replace a test that the teacher would give, or no, it's
No.
something so totally separate?
Separate.
Okay, just for a little standpoint.
Mr. Byrne?
I have one major area that I'm concerned about, and that's the accelerated math, 6. I don't believe that the gifted and talented program at the end of 2nd grade, particularly where the students age, whether they were born in September or whether they were born in June, there's such a big spread in the age of the kids at the end of 2nd grade. I don't think they should be identified and allowed to be in an advanced program all the way into 6th, 7th, maybe even 8th grade because of their placement. If the parents are spending a lot more time with them, or if they're having tutors and things, they could get that recognition that they are advanced students, but others develop a little later, others work harder and catch up. I don't think it's proper to not test those kids every year. And so I'm very much opposed to the current gifted and talented program. And to address the 6th grade, I want to go back and address the 2nd grade. I don't agree with what we're doing. I think it's penalizing many kids. And I will give you my example. In college, the prep school students were ahead of us. But if you work harder, you pass them. And so they had the advanced placement and everything, but guess what? There's a lot of things that influence how you're going to do long-term in a program, and to penalize the ones that don't have the tutors or their parents didn't spend a lot of time with, I think is wrong. And that's what I think the gifted and talented program, as it sits, does. I don't know about the other item, and that's the ASL, that's the language, a sign language. I'm not sure, because I think that got a lot of attention this year, and a lot of people signed up for it. I'm not sure long-term the need is that great. I'm not sure that program should be expanded at the expense of the regular language arts, foreign languages. So I don't
No,
know the
this
answer.
would not be expended at the expense of anything. Nothing gets lost when this is added. It is interesting to note that we're not seeing a lot of students using this as their primary world language. There's a lot of students choosing this as an elective, and there is a great deal of interest in the students going beyond the 2nd year, the year 2 that was introduced this year. And then I just want to go back to your comment about the accelerated math and say your point notwithstanding, and I think everyone understands where you're coming from, the program exists and there has to be a place for these telescope students who just finished grades 3, 4, and 5 in the telescope program, because they've already completed all of the math of grade 3, 4, 5, and 6. So the course is necessary, but also there are on-ramps in place for students who did not get in after taking that original testing in 2nd grade.
I would challenge the equality of the program. You can say that there are ramps, but the other kids are getting a more advanced program. I think what we're doing is very bad for some students. because they learn from one another and what have you. You take a group of kids out of the classroom, and then you don't test them again. I think the current program is very flawed. And so, now, I didn't know that the number of kids taking the sign language course was not that popular, but if it is to go on, do you think the need is there? And if they're taking that course, they're not taking something else. So I don't know. I appreciate what your comments are, and maybe I have to back off on English or the sign language, but I'm very much opposed to the program of second grade identifying the kids that go to gifted in town. I think that hurts the district badly.
Are there any other questions on the curriculum report that are not STEAM related? Oh, Mr. Fry?
The STEAM Academy,
We're going to get to that after we're done all the other curricular issues. I have one. I have very, very strong opinions about the Honors Algebra 2 program.
Me too.
And I actually read all those little attached charts and numbers, and the one that jumped out at me, and correct me if I'm wrong, in Honors Algebra 2, there were 52 students in 10th grade or higher in Honors Algebra 2, and of those 52 students, 40 of them earned a B- or below in that class. I don't think it's the students. I think it's the curriculum, the way it's being delivered, and the starting point disadvantage the non-fast track students are getting going into the course. Am I correct with my number
I'm not sure.
there? I calculate that's 77% of the 10th grade and older kids who took Honors Algebra 2 last year. 77% got a B- and lower. And I'm going to guess it's not the students, it's how they are receiving the curriculum. And I am not in favor of a year-by-year rollout. We've got to help these kids right away. Because what's happening, and I can speak anecdotally, is talented math students who weren't in the accelerated math program are dropping out of honors math because they feel so disengaged and so frustrated in the Algebra 2 experience. So year-by-year rollout is not going to work for me, and separate sections maybe, but the numbers to me were astonishing and frustrating.
Yeah, I expressed the same frustration at the meeting, and would, obviously, we're impatient to see change, but the need to address the Algebra 2, I think, is being addressed in the plan of separating the students, because it's not just separating the 9th and 10th graders into separate sections, but we also talked a lot at the meeting, and I know that there are still discussions. I know Ms. Bowman and Dr. Heineman and people are talking about like how they're going to monitor that Algebra 2 honors class and try to better differentiate for the students in there. So I know it's like an ongoing process.
Well, look, it's not a matter to me of impatience. It's a matter of kids losing their self-esteem and love of math from going through that program, and I watched it happen.
I'm watching it now.
Yeah, and I kept being told all year long, there's differentiation, but 77% at B- or below, clearly the differentiation is not working. We've got to do something different, and that's my very strong opinion. All right, any other thoughts on curricular topics that are not STEAM? All right, Mrs. Gray, let's talk about STEAM.
Well, I think what we want to have is a dialogue here, because you heard from my report that unusually, because it's pretty common after listening to what the administration and everyone in the room has to share at a curriculum meeting, we often come to a consensus, and we did not. So it's only appropriate that all board members have a chance to weigh in.
Yeah.
With that, I'll reiterate my position just to start it off, and that is, first, that in September, we saw the STEAM Academy survey results, and much to my surprise, I think I'm probably on record, if anyone went back and looked at video, that I was not in favor of the Academy model nor the application process. But having seen what I saw in the survey results, I felt surprisingly compelled to keep the application process. However, I do not necessarily agree with tying the introductory course to the Design and Create course, which then locks in a student's elective period and potentially prevents them from taking another fine arts such as music or art. So I'd like to see that go away.
I was there too, so I can say what I thought. I agree with what Mrs. Gray said about not tying the design and creation course, because I think the students, it's meeting their fine arts requirement, and I think they should have the choice of how to meet that fine arts requirement. But I was one of the people that said I would like to change away from the academy model for primarily two reasons. I was never really excited about the whole application process because I saw all the kind of like the stress and hype that surrounded it for these 8th graders, and kind of felt that students don't really know necessarily what they want at that age. You know, some of them might change their mind a year later and wish they had applied. But then also we've seen, and I've heard, we've seen some attrition of kids who dropped out of the academy already, but we've also heard of other students saying that they may drop out after sophomore year to take more AP classes or whatever. So we don't really know for sure, and it's too bad that we don't have that data, what the attrition rate would be. But I just feel like for scheduling purposes and for just being as efficient as we can with our dollars and being fair to all students, we don't want to be running sections with only 12 students in there. So we're going to end up mixing other kids in anyway, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of the academy model. So I just feel like, given all the facts, I'm leaning towards just changing it into students can apply to be in the Project Lead the Way sequence, and if they want to add those other things on, AP Physics, AP Bio, AP Seminar, they can do exactly the same thing as the academy, you know, provides, but they're not being locked into it from, you know, when they make this decision in 8th grade. So that's where I stood on it.
Dr. Dunton?
So I made the point in the committee that we were, part of what sold some of us on the academy was kind of a concern that the courses, Project Lead the Way courses, wouldn't be popular enough and the enrollment wouldn't be sustaining enough without this academy umbrella for it and sort of this special designation. And that hasn't really borne out at all, because the elective sections, there are so many elective sections. You know, the academy is one section, and then there's 3 or 4 sections that are elective, where the kids who are not in the academy are still signing up for this. And I don't know, I was kind of not on board with it to begin with, because I do believe that middle school is a really early time to be committing all your high school electives to one thing. And I think electives are about exploration and choice. And so I felt that the academy was actually restricting rather than opening up choice. So I was very supportive of the recommendation to not have the admissions process anymore, and also for the reasons that Robin had cited. So, I mean, for me, the biggest thing was the enrollments. And then as far as performance on outcomes, I felt that, you know, the academy obviously selects for students who are ultra motivated. So it stands to reason that those sections might have better performance, particularly when some of the elective sections are, you know, have a high percentage of second semester seniors. So I don't think that, you know, the performance of students being necessarily reflects the fact that there's some advantage to them being in the academy per se. And then something that came up for me afterwards that is a consideration that I had thought about, because we were doing the classroom visits and happened to go to the biotechnology class. And I spoke to that teacher about the difference between the academy, her academy section, and the others, because that's a very popular one. So she teaches multiple sections that are not academy. And a point that she brought up was that the academy is freshmen, and so they have not yet completed biology. And so she teaches that section a little bit differently, because the way the course works, topics are brought up that are won't have been covered yet in their concurrent enrollment being in biology. So then she needs to spend more time on that. I think that even it still can work without an academy, because it's just a matter of scheduling by grade level if she's going to do things differently with kids who are concurrently enrolled in biology versus kids who have already completed 1 year of biology. But that was one complicating factor that was just a difference between how she taught the academy class, but I don't think it was because it was the academy class, it was because they're freshmen.
And I was the last one. I actually surprisingly support the STEAM Academy. After we saw the result, I felt that there was, an argument for success for the model. I see the value in keeping the kids together, and I too, in my classroom visits, went to a second-year STEAM class and was able to talk to the teacher and the students, and I really saw camaraderie, and it's like a team feeling in that room. The kids all knew each other. They felt there was a different comfort level. The teacher felt like, it was just different starting with a class where they knew each other and were able to hit the ground running. There was, a same level of commitment, but, with the students, they knew what they were getting into. They interviewed heavily to get into the STEAM Academy, and they're all like-minded students who want to do this and want to pursue it and want to explore the classes together. So whether we do design and creation as part of the STEAM Academy, I could go either way with that, but I do think that the model is working, and I know I'm in the minority, but I do see value in it. So.
Mr. Byrne?
I think high school, for many of the students, is the last chance to have a balanced, broad-based education. When you get on to college, and I took engineering, history, and many of the courses were not part of my curriculum. I couldn't take a history course. I had to take science, and let's talk about engineering just for a second. The first 2 years had no engineering. It was all math and calculus and physics and chemistry and thermodynamics. It just went on and on. The engineering began in the third and fourth year. We didn't even begin to have it in the first 2 years, and yet we're trying to put it into the high school. But let me go further. Two of my children, one took, they took a lot of things, but I'm only talking about two of them. One took business and one took electrical engineering. And they decided at the end of their college program that they might want to consider to be doctors. So both went on to graduate school to 1 year at night, taking the pre-med courses, and they're both doctors today. They didn't take pre-med in college. In fact, many of the students that go on to medicine don't take pre-med. It's a later decision, and they have to learn more and talk to people. And so I don't think starting the pre-med program in high school makes any sense to me at all. Plus, I think many of the students that want to be engineers, for example, the physics and the math is almost impossible. So just because you want to be something, I would very much support a program that talked about careers, maybe a 2-semester course, that talked about the different careers and the requirements and how long you have to go to school and what the job, some of these engineering jobs, for example, with the manufacturing now in China, or at least not part of the Northeast, you're not going to live here. You're going to take those courses, become an engineer, you're not going to live here. Yes, if you're a civil engineer, but you have to be near the plants in many, many cases. There's so many things that enter into that analysis, and to try and pretend that you're doing that for high school kids, I think it's a big mistake. So that's my comments on the STEM and STEAM program. I think they ought to be scrapped. Yes, some electives, but I would even minimize those, because I think the broader, look at the world today with the lack of history and the lack of understanding of how we interface with one another, and the economic systems. And most of the people have no clue on how any of that works, and we're ready to kill each other, wars and everything. We need more history. We need more understanding of civilization. So I would argue for a much broader education with one course in, or maybe two courses in career planning. But I think if you skip the broad base in the high school, you're asking maybe for a world that we're going to enter into very soon, and I'm opposed to that.
Mr. Fry, do you still have comments?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We have the STEAM Academy, and part of this is clarification. And we're talking about, in your curriculum committee minutes, that we're going to year 3 of the STEAM Academy. We also have Project Lead the Way, which I understand you need 3 parts of that. And then we have accelerated math, which has started early on in the school year. And I'm not quite sure if we're trying to do too much. Project Lead the Way, you need 3 steps. I'm sure anybody could take 4 or 5 or whatever they want if they're available, but I don't know that we have to have every single one. I don't know that we have the facilities to do all these classes at the same time. So that's kind of my concern, that we're trying to do accelerated math from early. We're doing the STEAM Academy, we're doing Project Lead the Way, adding more courses in the STEAM Academy. So I'm just a little wary of that.
Can I just jump in for 1 second and I want to clarify a point that John is making. The year 3 of the STEAM Academy for, is it 2, Brian, of the tracks is an existing course at Ridge High School. So AP Physics, for example, would be stop me if I'm saying the wrong thing, please, would be the course that the engineering path would take for Project Lead the Way. So it happens that Project Lead the Way recognizes AP Physics as the 3rd year of a sequence if you started with the first one.
Oh, it's fine.
No? Okay, okay. So then there would be one more, other than the AP course.
For juniors, okay.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because they don't have a free elective that year. So there would be an additional elective junior year. So in addition to the one you see, AP Seminar, right? Isn't that the one we're talking about tonight?
For each one.
Right, and then AP Research, is that the last one?
That's the senior.
Okay, an elective for all students. Okay.
How many is that?
It's the one we have tonight, one more, the one Brian's talking about. I don't know the name because we're not there yet. But, and then the AP Research would be an additional elective available but not tied to. Anyone could take that, whether they're in the STEAM Academy or not.
So there's at least
Well,
4.
if you're taking AP Physics, that's considered in the STEAM Academy?
Yes.
Yes, if we kept the STEAM Academy the way it is now, then it would be required in the STEAM Academy that you take AP Physics at the same time as the 3rd Project Lead the Way. No?
Engineer.
Senior year. Okay, senior year. But if we don't keep the academy, then you would take your Project Lead the Way sequence, and then you could choose to take these AP seminar and things if you want to,
Yeah.
in addition, but you didn't have to. You could just get the certificate with your 3 Project Lead the Way courses.
That's if you have a minimum of 3.
Right.
But can you have 6, 7?
Well, they don't have that many in each track, right?
Well, is AP
Well, you don't have that
Physics,
many
is AP Physics, is that one of them?
You get like a special thing if you do the AP seminar or research, right, Brian?
Capstone.
Capstone, like certificate or something,
you get an AP
in addition to your regular Project Lead the Way certificate.
Seminar and research. Right.
And have we seen so far, as they go up through the steps, are there more students taking them, or? Okay.
Electives and the three other.
Just one follow-up to that is, the seniors came up. Someone said something about the seniors, and the feeling from the administration was that with time and word of mouth, some of that would shake out on its own. You know, there might be seniors that, or juniors that opt not to take one of those elective science courses because it was more work than they were, anticipating, and so that would be shared and self-correct.
The first year, a lot of seniors signed up for it, and some of them thought maybe it was going to be easy, and it wasn't.
Okay.
So then the word spreads.
In this Project Lead the Way, do they get credit, like AP credit? No.
Only if it's an AP course.
Excuse me?
So where's John stand? So I think what Dr. Heineman was trying to explain was that all the options are available to all the students regardless of whether or not they're in the academy. The academy is the structure of grouping the students, as Karen Richmond was describing, for those other benefits of being together with a common interest. So we're trying to gauge where each board member stands on this issue of whether or not to keep that academy model for the grouping purposes and the selection purposes, not so much whether or not the courses themselves are something that we should continue. I think for the most part, that's been established that the electives are okay. It's just a question of, do we just offer the electives, or do we keep the academy grouping and selection model going? So I think that's what people are trying to weigh in on.
I'm really struggling with this, and I'm going to look to my colleagues and Dr. Heineman for some help. Just stepping back as board members, our responsibility primarily is to meet the educational needs of our students while also keeping in mind their social and emotional well-being. And there's two sides to it, because I'm hearing a lot of rumors of attrition rates and parents gaming the system. My kid's going to do the academy for freshman and sophomore year, but then drop out to maximize AP classes later on. But conversely, a couple of weeks ago, a side effect of evaluating our technology plan, I got to sit in on Dr. Belisia's 8th grade academy science class, and it was unbelievable. These kids were motivated and working together and on task and covering the regular curriculum 1 or 2 days a week while covering the enhanced curriculum, and it was an incredible thing to see. So, we've really got two things to decide. The first is whether or not design and creation is mandatory. So my first question is, can they get through an academy model without that one course, which gives students an opportunity to go outside of the science arena for an elective in another area?
I just want to interrupt you for a second and say that has been established. The going-in position of the administration upon the beginning of the discussion at curriculum was that they were prepared to eliminate the requirement
Okay.
of design and create and eliminate the application process. And then when it was put to the table for board members, committee members to discuss, there were the varying opinions on what to do.
Okay, so that makes that easy, the application process, and so that's good. So then the question is, do we still need the academy model? So I guess, the pros are these students grouped together, learning off of each other for an enhanced experience. If we're eliminating the application process and the mandatory design and creation, would there be any benefit from eliminating the academy model, other than saying,
No, I think the question is, the question is whether or not to eliminate the application process.
Oh,
Which
okay.
is what creates the academy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the question.
well, I would imagine if we eliminate the application process, even if it's self-selecting, the kids in the classes are going to be motivated and working together as well. So what would be the risk of eliminating the application process? What's the disadvantage of it?
I think they were saying that the disadvantage would be that these kids wouldn't be as motivated. I don't know. That's
I mean,
the impression I'm
the
getting.
kids I observed
If we
were
refer back to the student and teacher survey, it was kind of self-explanatory. The sections where they applied to get in and they were all in a cohort were higher performing. And I think it's important to note that grade performance was not an indicator of admission to the academy. It was interest and passion, and the members of the administration who shared with us their experiences of listening to the students in the interview process were very emphatic about making sure we understood that it wasn't about A's and A pluses. So it's not to say that the highest performing, or whatever term you want to use for the students, are the ones that are in the academy. It's the ones that demonstrated the greatest passion and interest for the topic.
Okay, let's see. I think I saw Mrs. Woodard and then Mrs.
Yeah.
Corn, yeah?
Yeah, I wanted to just say that one thing is I also observed a biomedical sciences class, and it was not an academy class. The kids were highly motivated, and they were all very engaged in the material and worked very hard during the whole period. So I think the class has a really good teacher, and I think it's really a really interesting class, regardless of whether you're in the academy or not. And so that was just one comment. And I gave this whole matter a lot of thought over the weekend, and I actually did ask some additional questions. And one thing we haven't mentioned is I believe that the students that are currently in the academy will have the opportunity to complete the 4 years. So we're not taking anything away from the students that have already interviewed and gone through the application process. Is that, yeah, okay, so that's all good. And I thought a lot about it, and I just feel like we're still going to be offering all this, even if we take the application process away and eliminate the grouping in the academy, we're still going to be offering the same electives. Students can choose what they want to take. They don't have to make a commitment for 4 years when they're just starting high school. We've already seen that the Project Lead the Way classes are proving to be popular with the students, so I know that was one of the concerns at the outset. And then I'm also agree that the design and creation should not be mandatory, a mandatory elective, and that would give kids the option of taking a different one. So I guess for me, the advantages of eliminating the application process and allowing students to take the electives that they want to take sort of, that to me seemed like it had more benefits. So I would agree with Mrs. McEwen and Dr. Dunton about their support for this revised proposal.
Mrs. Corn?
Looking at the I was survey as well, and the grades between the kids who are in the academy and the kids not in the academy didn't seem that different. They weren't like, I know you're saying that it's not based on grades, and I was also in the biomedical class, and I thought the kids were way into it. They were excited, they liked it, and they weren't in the academy as well. And I'm afraid that when you start an academy and you have an application process when they're that young, I mean, we're all talking about trying to lessen stress on kids, and I feel like with parents, you gotta get into the academy. With peers, you gotta get into the academy. You better apply. And if you don't apply, oh my God. So that it might discourage other kids from doing it because they feel like maybe they don't want to apply. That's not what they want to do because they're 12. I don't know. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, and we're not creating doctors or engineers. We're giving them a taste. We're giving them some exploration. So I don't see the point of of an academy where you have 12 kids in a class, and I get it. They're all working together, and it's wonderful. But I think you could do that. You can get to that with kids who are interested. They're going to take the classes if they're interested in it. So I think you'll still get that interest in those certain classes, and you'll still get that excitement. I wasn't a huge fan to begin with of it, because I feel like it's public school, it's not private school, we shouldn't be constantly, I don't know, grouping kids into the smart ones and the engineers, and they're too young for that. High school, it really is a place to explore, to find all kinds of different things they're interested in, so I would really, but I think it's great that the kids who are already in it can finish it, because that's important, like you guys said, and also, but I don't see the need for a test. And then with the design and create class, that becomes open to everyone, or does it get eliminated? The first class, like what happens to that class if the
It's an
academy?
elective.
It just becomes an
so-
elective for
And it was
anyone.
much loved by the students who
Right.
took it.
So, but that class was only open to academy kids?
Well, I think there was conversation, we didn't really finalize that there, because there's a half-year course now and there's a full-year course. Would we maintain both of them, or would we go to? Okay. So that.
But that wouldn't go away. It would just be opened up to all students. So in my opinion, I think that would be a better way to go as far as, because I feel like more people benefit from it if there's not an academy model. But you still have the classes.
Okay. All right. Dr. Dunton?
I just wanted to say to your point, I think people have kind of clarified it, but just to directly say to your point about what are the advantages of eliminating the application process. I mean, as Mrs. Korn said, the stress and, that whole thing creates, but I mean, it's this overall feeling of exclusiveness, that there's this thing from which a lot of people who maybe were interested in are excluded, and they can still take the electives, but they're not in the academy. So I think that is part of what goes away, and I see that as a benefit.
Mr. Byrne and then Mrs.
I think all the kids going to Ridge should be hopefully feeling that they all belong to the same big family, and to separate them into different groups so that they're not part of the big family, they're part of separate little groups. We're almost talking about the NFL football games and all the crap that's going on. I think to stress the unity of the groups is much more important than just to artificially set up these little, hey, I'm not part of that group, I'm part of this group. I think that's a terrible mistake. I have a little story that's maybe not pertinent, but the board 20 or so years ago, the votes were 8-1 there too. And yet we get together twice a month and we're great friends. Because disagreement doesn't make you, enemies. It makes you, hey, you're trying to achieve a common goal, and you're all part of Ridge High School and what have you. I think it's a mistake to focus on academies and we're different. I think it's very important to argue that we're part of the great class. If I meet a classmate from college, whether they were a liberal arts student or science or whatever they were, it's, hey, oh my gosh, how are you? I don't want to hear they were part of the academy and not part of your class. So I would argue that the emphasis on separation is a terrible mistake.
Mrs. Gray?
At the risk of sounding, I'm not really sure what, we have exclusivity at Ridge High School. We have a select choir, and we have a wind ensemble, and we have other things for which you must audition or in some way demonstrate yourself to have interest or passion for something. It just doesn't happen to be this, and I just don't see the distinction. I'm open to whatever the board supports. It's not really about the STEAM Academy, but I just think it's important to look at it from all sides and remember that exclusivity really shouldn't be okay for some things and not for other things.
Good point.
I'm sorry.
Mrs. Korn?
I have a question. Now, if, in eliminating it, does it help with the arts part of that? Like the music, wasn't there an issue with kids who are going to take it? I know in the survey it said a lot of kids were just going to, I wasn't going to continue with anyway. But does this, if you make it just, eliminate the academy portion of it, does it make it easier for kids to still stay with their music
If design and create is no longer a mandatory elective for entering freshmen, then they would have an open elective. And if we did away with the academy altogether, there would be another open elective in junior year. There's already one in sophomore year and senior year, but there would be another open elective in junior year. So there would be 4 open electives for all students, even if they wanted to take 4 sequential STEAM courses. I mean, Project Lead the Way courses.
All right, Mr. Markarian's kind of been doing an informal tally as people were conversing, and right now it looks like 7 board members have expressed opinions. 5 prefer to go with a non-academy model, 2 prefer to stick with an academy model, and 2 board members did not express a clear opinion at this point. Is that enough information to move forward?
Yes.
Yes. And I've been advised by council, I went out of order. We had 2 motions that we should have probably done away with, or not done, voted on before this big discussion. No disrespect to our new textbook and courses, so.
Could we just wrap that up by like a show of hands poll or something? I feel like
Because
we
I
should.
think everybody weighed
Yeah, I
in.
think there's 9 of us. There should be,
It should be 7.
you know,
Is it okay to do a show?
Yeah, you can do a show.
Yeah, because there's no motion on the,
understood.
okay. So by a show of hands, who wants to continue with the academy model? 1, okay. Who wants to discontinue the academy model? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The same. And who is firmly undecided? That's me. Yeah,
So that's about right.
okay. All right. So now back to what I should have done originally, and my apologies. We have 2 items on the table to vote on. Mr. McLaughlin?
Mr. Byrne?
No.
This is for the approval of a textbook and some new courses. It's on our agenda.
I said no.
Oh, okay.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Dr. Dunton?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Mrs. Swerner?
Yes.
Madam President?
All right. Item number 17 is the Advocacy Committee. Is there anything to report this evening?
Not at this time, thank you.
Next are liaison committee reports. Are there any this evening? Mrs. Wooldridge?
Okay, so I have a question. So I would like to talk about the Somerset County Educational Services Commission position. It is a liaison position. I don't have a report. So is this a good place to do it, or do you want me to wait till board forum?
Mr. Crude, is there one place that's more
It sounds
preferable?
like a board form issue because it sounds like
Okay,
Okay.
you're looking for
which
somebody
is
else to maybe.
where I
Yeah,
had,
so- okay,
where I
I'll
had
wait.
it
It's fine.
noted.
This is just a question about report.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
already noted for board forum. Great. Any other liaison reports? Okay. Next is our ad hoc SEL committee report. Is there anything to report, Mrs. Richmond?
Yep, the committee met on October 12th. We talked about the board, the SEL committee, their desire to have more teacher input and feedback on some things, especially relating to homework, summer work, grading, things of that nature. And we just wondered how this could best be facilitated. We thought maybe we could build an agenda around like a team of staff coming to a meeting, similar to the way we do special topics for curriculum. And probably, I mean, what made the most sense, it seemed, was to break it out into like a K-5 area or a 6-12. And there was some talk about having maybe our December 21st meeting possibly be a homework focus for that meeting, representatives from each department or guidance coming, and maybe including teachers with multiple levels to add more discussion that teach multiple levels to come. We don't know if that's feasible or not, but it was proposed. We talked about the technology initiative as it related to SEL concerns, and what came out was what is the district's stand with Chromebooks that are already being used in the district? Will parameters be put on screen time? Will guidelines be instituted? What kind of PD and teacher support training will the teachers receive to deliver more technology instruction or more familiarity with technology in the classroom? And how will we monitor parity amongst teachers in the classroom and make sure that they're all using technologies in ways that are comparable to each other? There was a request for board when they were going to classroom visits to see what a center looked like. Some people wanted to see what a center looked like. And we're expecting more concerns to come out of after the classroom visits. But we haven't talked about that yet. A concern was expressed about the pace of classes and teachers getting through lesson plans and curriculum and being able to ask questions with technology and what kind of flexibility there'll be, because obviously they have to teach it in a little bit different way. We talked about senior meetings and transcripts. There was a lot of concern, especially from senior parents and seniors experiencing a lot of stress with the transition with Aspen and getting their college transcripts out. Ms. Jadis explained that the counselors weren't able to send transcripts without a guidance letter. That's sort of, they're sort of connected and related. But I think they seem to have worked it all out, and hopefully with the November 1st deadline looming, it's full steam ahead. There was just talk about colleges with rolling admissions are causing stress for students because they're advising students to apply earlier and earlier, especially they're telling students to apply as early as August when the applications are available to increase their chance of getting in early. And that's putting stress on the counseling department and the students. Let's see. Mr. Kraus commented that the district could really use a part-time person for Aspen support. Because right now the teachers and staff are trying to work through just simple functionality, and if we had somebody who was more familiar with Aspen, it would greatly help our staff. There was a little bit of follow-up about National Honor Society requirements and communication. There was talk about needing 5 teachers' feedback to support each student applying for National Honor Society, and there was question if that was really too many. And so Mr. Krause was going to go back and talk to Mr. Gilmore and Ms. Cahill about this. With regard to WAM's PE and grading system changes causing stress, Mrs. Hudock and Mr. Shello sent out a letter on October 6th to William Annan Community explaining the reason for this change, and the committee thought it was a very thorough and clear letter, and I provided a copy to the board in the minutes if you didn't see it. We also talked about continuing the conversation about rotating drop schedule, and there was a question if the November 16 meeting, which is our next meeting, if it could be dedicated to this topic and bring others into the meeting. You know, we still have many of the same concerns about science, music, things like that we wanted to talk about. Obviously lunch, the unit lunch, and how that would, what that would look like and how we go from here. And that's really it. Are there any questions? Yep.
Mr. Byrne?
I have a problem with the SEL committee because I think they're addressing issues that belong in the public and in the full board's discussion. Let me just list homework. Well, of course you have to have homework. Chromebooks. It looks like we probably need Chromebooks to be competitive in the modern world. The teachers should be teaching the program, so we need parity in the classroom. The pace of the classes, we've got very, very short classes. It's very tough to do all of it. And I just sat through, and when we get to board forum, sat through 3 or 4 courses. I'm shocked. When I went to school, the teacher was in the middle of the classroom teaching. The classes that I'm observing, the teacher's not in the middle of the class, teacher's not teaching. So very, very different than anything I've experienced. And when I asked, well, how are the kids doing? And then we go through the testing report with Park and we find out there's no comparison to really measure whether we're doing better or worse. I think there's a whole lot of questions here about, and the different groups. Some groups are studying and some groups aren't. We've got a lot of issues that shouldn't be a part of the Park Committee, SEL Committee. They should be part of the general board discussion. Let me keep on going. College transcripts, hey, how do you avoid it? College applications, National Honor Society, rotating job schedule. The one item that I haven't heard mentioned at all is social media. Guess what? One of the suicides, 3 people told them to commit suicide, social media. Here's the thing on the telephones. Being in the school, and I watched the kids while we were going through this sessions in school learning about technology. Kids are walking down the hallway. They're not talking to one another. They're on their telephones. We've got to, if that was the SEL focus, I would understand it. But you're challenging the very basis of school, which is full board discussion. It's not part of 4 people that are, can't even get the right idea of what they should be discussing. So I have a problem with the SEL committee. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for your 2 cents. Are there any other questions or comments from Mrs. Richmond? Mrs. Korn?
I had a question about the Aspen support thing. I don't even know if you would be able to answer it, but does Aspen, do they have, since they have people that can come and, without hiring someone part-time, since we bought their system, do they have support that can come help out for a little bit? I'm sure it happened already, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, so they have quite a bit of training going on, whether it's webinar or having people come in person that have been doing a lot of training with the staff. Obviously, I think some of the sentiment expressed is associated with change. Change is difficult. There is a lot to learn, and we have talked about this request in the Personnel Committee to see if we might be able to fund someone that could not only help with Aspen, but really be a backup to the one person that has always been our student information systems guru, in charge of all of our state reporting. We're never really pleased when we're in the position of having one person that's the expert and nobody else can really back them up. So we actually did talk about that in personnel, in the Personnel Committee to see if we might be able to find a way to fund another person that's IT/Aspen database manager. Yeah, and we're down a couple experienced people. We replaced one, and we have the other out. So we're really recommending that, and that was one of the things we talked about in personnel to find some ways to help support the implementation and really to get the most out of the system. Alex Blinder, the IT director, talked to the Personnel Committee about the fact that we selected a good system, a system that is very, very robust and has a lot that we can take advantage of, but building up a district expert to help us take advantage of those things was something that he recommended. So I would like to advertise for that position and start to interview. Obviously, nobody gets hired without the board's approval, but I would like to start advertising.
Any other questions, Mrs. Gray?
Just a quick comment to say that the Social Emotional Learning Committee is not debating all of those topics. We are in fact discussing things that have created student stress. There was never a question of eliminating transcripts, for example, but a discussion about how stressful it was for seniors whose transcripts could not be transmitted because there was an issue with the student information system's communication with Naviance, which we wouldn't have known if we hadn't asked the question, and that was why the question was asked. But just like any other committee, curriculum, personnel, finance, which I know Mr. Burns sits on, we're all discussing things like the rotating drop schedule because it has an impact in those areas. So the reason the SEL committee was created was to address social emotional learning issues, i.e. stressors for students. And any of the topics that Mrs. Richmond just mentioned were only touched on in the vein that they created stress for students, not to reconsider their existence in any way, shape, or form.
Any other questions or comments for Mrs. Richmond? For Mrs. Richmond?
I don't know whether I agree at all. The fact that 4 members are doing the work that the full board, that's my argument. Not that the...
Well, the board voted on the approval of that
Well, I
committee. You were here
understand.
for that vote,
So
so.
you had 4 out of 9, and the members, that's almost 5.
Yeah,
So
but-
all you need is one more person. I'm just arguing the same thing I have been arguing, and that is the full participation to the public and with the board of these topics, and that the committees are not little secret organizations. And here's another better example. I challenge the committees, and I say it should be done here in public and not done on the side. It's a common theme of mine, and I'm not changing the position.
I know, and the common theme continues that our board has chosen to operate by the committee system, which means that committees of 4 are allowed to meet and work on issues and then report them out publicly, which we do at every public meeting. Mrs. Woldridge?
Yeah, when I was down at the New Jersey School Board's workshop, Mrs. McEwen and I both attended, and I think Mr. Markarian was there also, a training session on effective board committees. And I was very pleased to see that we were basically following the proper procedures for operating under a committee system. And I was sitting at a table with other board members from other districts, and I came away thinking that we're doing a pretty good job with our committees compared with some of the problems that some of the other districts were having. But the basic message was that we are basically following the procedures for effective board committees.
And I disagree,
Well, I know that.
but I'm getting too old to fight you. I don't want to
All
hire a
right.
lawyer and
So
make
now
no
we are
exceptions.
up to item number
I'm
20.
hoping the public wakes up and says, hey, we want more stuff in the public. That's,
Mrs. Richmond?
And just as a suggestion, perhaps when we do the reorg, some board members will participate on more committees. And if that one board member feels that he has an interest in certain committees, maybe he can throw his name in the hat to participate.
That is a good
you're
suggestion.
going to say I could belong to curriculum and personnel? You don't
I
have
could
to
say
answer that.
I don't make that decision. I don't
understand. No
decide
one
that.
will, don't worry. I've been on both in the past, but. what a
All
joke.
right, let's move on to item number 20, which is public comment on anything that you'd like to address to us. Please sign in, state your name and address, limit your comment to 5 minutes or less, and please only address the board once during each comment session.
James Vopel, 20 Evergreen Place. In July 2016, I respectfully disagreed with the board's decision with respect to the teacher's contract and the cuts that were made for the aides and support staff. And yet, this evening you approved a raise for our superintendent, Mr. Markarian. If you value the people who work in this district, why would you cut salary for one group and not for everyone? What message are you sending to the entire staff? So I just wanted to put that out there. Also, I would hope that the board would be fiscally responsible when it's time to negotiate with the administrators, being that roughly 29 of the 31 administrators and central office staff make over $100,000, and 24 of those make over $125,000. The second point I would like to make quickly is I'm sure everybody's heard talk about the development in the quarry, and I just want to point out some things that I think the board needs to be mindful of moving forward in the future. Our mayor, Ms. Graziano, gave some facts at the Township Committee meeting last Tuesday, projecting that with the addition of 200 homes, that there would be an influx of 105 to 128 new students in the district. I'm going to tell you right now that number is way off base. If you take a look at history, and I took this right off of your website from Mr. Draper, December 26, 2008, on public school facility expansions to accommodate enrollment. Between the years 1985-86 to 2008-2009, the total enrollment of this district increased 407%. So what I'm worried about is the fact that the number of kids possibly moving into the district is going to be well above what our mayor has stated. And my numbers and my figuring, if you're averaging the 1.7 children per household that was used for the figures back when the Hills was built, back with the Mount Prospect School being built, was that you're going to have between 400 and 500 students coming into the district. So I know it's hard to use the past to predict the future. There are many unknowns. However, the budget was capped at 2% in 2006. So a lot of programs you had to cut based on that. And now, since we have a decreased enrollment in this district, how about trying to put some of those programs back? However, now that we have this possibility of 400 to 500 students coming into the district, what's going to happen? You're going to have to expand schools. We don't have any room to expand Cedar Hill. There's no land to expand Cedar Hill. We would have to redistrict. So you're going to have to now move people from one school possibly to another school, because of the fact that you now have this influx of students. How can this district survive? A lot of parents are talking about class size. Class size are going to balloon with the fact that you're having an influx of people. We haven't really recovered from the population increase of the late 90s, early 2000s. Now we're starting, and I talked about this at the last board meeting, the ebbs and flows of population and increased enrollment and decreasing of enrollment. So what's happening is we're in a downturn right now. You add this in the future, we're going to get a huge influx, and that's going to put a tremendous burden on this community, because there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to sustain what we have with what is going to be coming in to this district. And so I'm hoping that the board is mindful of that. Keep that in the back of your mind when these discussions are taking place at Town Hall. Please become part of the process. And also, too, the one last thing. I don't think the board has ever questioned the enrollment numbers from the Township Committee. Please do that. Ask them specifically where they're getting their numbers from. Please specifically ask the mayor where she came up with the 105 to 128 students that this development is going to bring in, because I'm telling you right now, the numbers just don't add up. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Good evening. My name is Ryan Parker, and I am the mother of 4 students currently in our school district. I have 2 sons at William Annan in 8th and 6th grades, and a daughter and son at Cedar Hill in 3rd and kindergarten. I'm here tonight to address a major safety concern I have at Cedar Hill School. I'd like to start by thanking the board for their efforts to improve safety at Cedar Hill by changing the entry into the school and adding a new vestibule area that anyone must enter before they can gain access into the main school building. When my children first started school, elementary school safety wasn't something that I gave much thought. Unfortunately, we soon became aware that even our youngest students must be protected from someone wishing to do them harm, so I applaud the board for taking the steps to see that is happening. Where we continue to fall short at Cedar Hill is the side entrance off of the car line area where the students practice orchestra and band instruments. I remember the first time I saw them practicing there thinking it seemed like a terrible spot for music lessons from an acoustic and temperature control perspective. But again, as times change, so did my thinking. My daughter plays the violin, and she and the other students who practice in that area are not being protected during the school day. In fact, I can't think of a more vulnerable spot than where they are located. I was thrilled when I heard that Mr. Simpola and the PTO were working to remedy the situation by adding accordion doors to the stage in the cafeteria that would allow the students to practice in a safe space with little disruption to the rest of the student body. So I was very disheartened to learn that this plan was not going to move forward because of the fear of added costs that could be incurred once the construction process begins. What is the price we are willing to pay to keep our children safe? I learned that the Board of Education was able to provide funds to the WAMS athletic organization in order to purchase a shed for equipment. As the parent of a WAMS soccer player, I'm happy to hear that not all costs of athletics at the middle school level must be funded by the players' families, but I question, is the storage of soccer balls and corner flags really a more valuable investment than the safety of our students? I can't imagine you think so, and certainly I don't. So I ask you to not only allow Mr. Simpola and the PTO to move forward with the accordion door project, but to find in your budget the money necessary to incur any costs that may arise associated with this project. I think the safety of our students is worth it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer White, 65 Winding Lane. I'm going to start by putting my parent hat on and address two different things. One, I am so happy to hear you talk about Algebra 2. For years, I sat here listening to people talk about the math program, and it was before I had experienced it. And so I would hear it, but I didn't really understand what it was all about until last year when I had a sophomore in Algebra 2 who went from being up here emotionally and with confidence to down here. I don't think he's alone. So when you talk about the numbers, and I think you used 55 kids got B- or below. I'd be curious, how many kids withdrew from the course who had once been confident, strong students up here? And this is where I do think we do a disservice to the students, because I think there's such a big difference between the CP math program and the honors math program. And there are some kids who they're tutored up the wazoo. They take these math courses during the summer to give them the upper hand, and it puts the other kids who are just going through life at a regular, normal pace and just are strong kids because they're strong kids at a disadvantage. And I question that, the fairness of that. But I also recognize, life isn't fair, and so I said to my kid, no, you're not taking it during the summer. No, you're not getting tutored. You're going to do what you can do. That's what we're here to have you do. So I guess what I'm saying is maybe instead of looking just at how can we fix the 6th grade, because I'm not really convinced that that's going to solve this problem. I think maybe we need to look at the high school program and say, okay, we do need to have this, and not the AP, but we need to have the honors for these kids, and we need to have the CP for these kids. But maybe we need to have some middle math grouping for some of the kids who are not going to get tutored, who are not going to take these courses during the summer, but are strong kids, but they don't have the same confidence to be able to stick it out. But then you put them in the CP, and it just doesn't challenge them, and it's too easy, because they're in a class that you must take as a requirement, but it really isn't challenging you. And I don't think grades are the be-all and the end-all, but I don't think that an A student should not be able to take a course because he's at a disadvantage because the other kids are being tutored or taking it during the summer, and then have to go to a lower course where he's just there every single day, not challenged in the least. So that's my issue with the math. The second I have to say, as a parent who has a child this year in ASL, I am so thankful to have seen on your agenda today that you are expanding the program, because I think it's a wonderful opportunity. My child doesn't take it as an elective, it's his foreign language. He loves it, he's thriving, and he deserves, just like every other student in the foreign language, to be able to take as many years of that language as he chooses. You have multiple years for French, Italian, Spanish. It is recognized as a state-approved foreign language, and I am thrilled to see you offer this to kids. So I did want to come forward as a parent who's had experience with that. I'm going to shift very quickly and put my PTO president hat on and say I hate to have a soft spot in the public and out there, because there are people that are crazy in the world, and I don't feel like we want to say to them, hey, here's a soft spot that you can affect our kids. But the bottom line is we do have one. So I really hope we can look into this issue and rectify the situation, because there is nothing more important than the safety of our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, so I am going to close that portion of the agenda, and I think I can handle addressing most of this. For Ms. Parker and Ms. White regarding safety at Cedar Hill School, this is the first it's come, I believe, to the board's attention, so it's something that we are now aware of and will need to look into. Glad, Ms. White, you are thankful about ASL. The feedback that we're getting from students and their parents has been exceptional, both for the students who take it as their world language and the students who take it as an elective. And clearly, you know, Algebra 2 is on everyone's radar, and we're working to address those issues. Regarding Mr. Vopel's comments, the board is already part of the process of this quarry redevelopment. And by that, I want to clarify, we don't play a role in making the decision of what's being developed and how it's being developed, but we've actually been working with the Township Committee for probably close to a year now, with multiple meetings. They're just keeping us apprised of their plans and their progress, and we're sharing with them the potential implications to our school. They are aware of our concerns. Believe me, all the issues you've brought up, we have raised with the Township Committee. There's not much more we can do at this point, because we don't play a role in the development decision, but we're following it every step of the way, because it will make a big impact on our schools. Oh, and we did hire at our last public meeting a demographer, since Mr. Draper has retired, to get some, to check their numbers, well, to get some validity in new numbers and see what they're hearing, because there's a very broad range of opinion on what the impact is going to be, and there's no way of telling. And finally, regarding the superintendent's new contract, we had a suspicion that someone might ask us about it, so we do have a prepared statement that we can share with members of the press afterwards if you're interested. And our Chair of Personnel, Mrs. McEwen, if you would like to read it.
Would you like me to read it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. In 2015, Mr. Markarian and the board entered into a 5-year contract that was scheduled to expire in 2020. At that time, the state had very strict caps on superintendent salaries, which restricted Mr. Markarian's base salary to $167,500 for the term of his contract. He was also entitled to receive merit pay in an amount up to 14.99% of his base salary, but receiving the merit pay requires going through a time-consuming process and a lot of red tape on the part of both Mr. Markarian and the board in developing and reviewing merit goals and obtaining the approval of the Executive County Superintendent of Schools. There is nearly universal dissatisfaction throughout the state with the superintendent salary caps as they existed prior to this year. In many cases, principals and other district administrators earned almost as much as the superintendent, and in some cases even more. As a result, many talented administrators chose not to pursue superintendent positions because the available salaries were not worth the added responsibilities and loss of tenure protection. In other cases, successful superintendents opted to retire early or flee to nearby states that didn't have salary caps, such as New York and Pennsylvania, leading to the loss of many talented educational leaders. The state finally responded to these concerns and significantly revised the superintendent salary caps this spring. As of May 1st, 2017, a superintendent in a district similar to Berners Township is now entitled to earn a base salary of $196,584 with 2% annual salary increases. As was true under the previous regulation, a superintendent is also eligible to earn merit bonuses up to 14.99% of base salary. Probably the most important thing a Board of Education does is choose its chief school administrator. In our continuing efforts to afford our students the best possible education so that they can succeed in college and in life, it is vital that we provide for stability and continuity in district leadership. It is for these reasons that the board has determined to rescind Mr. Markarian's existing contract and replace it with a new 3-year contract. There is no change in the end date of the contract. It remains June 30, 2020. However, Mr. Markarian will now receive the base salary permitted under the new regulations with 2% annual increases. He has also agreed to waive his right to receive merit pay for the term of the contract. As a result, the actual cost of the new contract to the district will not be any greater than his previous contract when merit pay is considered. The new contract has been reviewed and approved by the Executive County Superintendent of Schools, in addition to being reviewed by Board Council. We believe this is a win-win for the district. The board maintains stability in the superintendent position while staying within budget. Mr. Markarian gets the benefit of an increased base salary, and the board and Mr. Markarian both benefit by eliminating the cumbersome merit pay process.
So now we are up to item number 21, board forum. And I know there was one topic that was already brought up to be addressed, and that was Somerset County Educational Services Commission. Mrs. Woolridge?
Yeah, okay. So I wanted to provide, first of all, I wanted to provide some information about this position, because I've been reporting on it for 5.5 years, but I've never really explained how I ended up doing this or anything. So the Somerset County Educational Services Commission is a county-wide organization, and they do have a board. Their board consists of one representative from every school district in Somerset County. So I've been the Berners Township rep ever since the spring of 2012. So Somerset County Educational Services Commission has 2 major components. There's, first of all, a transportation department. So they have been doing our in-district busing, both general ed and special education. They also contract with private vendors to do out-of-district special education busing, and they provide charter busing. The second component of the Somerset County Educational Services Commission is it's 3 school programs for special education students and alternative students, and they're all located in the same building in Bridgewater. So they have a Somerset Elementary Academy. They have, which is, K through 5, primarily special education. They have a Somerset Secondary Academy, which is grades 6 through 8 and then 9 through 12. And they have special education programs and then alternative education programs. Are you, keep going? Oh, keep going, okay. And then their newest program is their Career Center program, which is another high school program. And they offer career training in ShopRite, supermarket skills, graphic arts, power engines, and life skills. So anyway, it's a fairly diverse set of things. Their board meets once every other month. They meet in February, April, June, August, October, and December each year. And the meetings are basically like the first Wednesday of the month at 4:30 p.m. And the meeting place would be the Career Center down in Bridgewater. And an electronic packet is emailed to all the board members the week prior to the meeting. So this is also, the way it works is one representative needs to be appointed by our board, and you can also have one alternate who's appointed by our board. So what I would like to do is I'd like to kind of transfer this position to another board member since I've been on it for such a long time. So, but I wanted to provide some information so people knew what I was talking about.
And if I can speak on Mrs. Wooldridge's behalf, she has been doing this for 5.5 years, which is above and beyond the call of duty. Another interesting anomaly is we are required to send a representative to the regular meetings, and if not, we need to send our superintendent to represent our district
Right.
at the meetings, and he's got plenty of other important things to do with his time. So I think what she's very nicely asking is for some colleagues to step up in either the role as the primary rep or the alternate. You could even split it and go half and half.
Right.
But yeah, it's time for other people to please consider stepping up.
And that was it.
Mrs. Gray?
I just have a couple of comments because I'm not willing to have this conversation in a vacuum. I think we need to talk about the advocacy committee and the commitment that that committee calls for relative to the other committees. We have a 4-member committee. The expectation is that the committee members attend PTO meetings and other district-wide meetings. And to my knowledge, and I'm not speaking as an authority, but it seems the lion's share of that is done by 2 people. And then when there's something that everyone's interested in, then people go, which is understandable because a lot of us do go to those. So I'd like to propose that this be discussed in that light, that we have 9 board members, and either we share the load of this and other responsibilities beyond committee meeting responsibilities. We have a board member who attends all of the township committee meetings. That's another burden. I don't think it's reasonable to expect that responsibility to fall on 3 or 4 board members. I think it should be evenly distributed, or I propose that we go back to a time when there wasn't even a community relations committee, which is what the advocacy committee used to be called when it was first born, of a necessity for a referendum effort to build the space we're sitting in, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff in this district. So I have 2 suggestions. There may be more. One is that all board members share the responsibilities that we expect of a member of the advocacy committee equally, or that we eliminate it altogether. I'm going to throw a third one in there. Or that we consider that we don't need board representation at every single PTO meeting, maybe the ones where there's a presentation or something like that. And of course, there are probably other possibilities. Oh, that said, I'm willing to, I had this conversation with Linda a month or so ago, and I am willing to help with the responsibilities of the ed services, but I can't do everyone because of the time of day.
Thank you for stepping up. Mrs. Korn?
I would split, I think I could split that with you.
Excellent. That is good. And then just to piggyback on what you were saying, I have been saying for years that because our responsibilities seem to be increasing year after year after year, although I think it is heroic to commit to attend every single PTO meeting. The reality is, I think it would be more realistic for us to attend PTO meetings when our presence is requested for a particular issue, to commit to do that. I think it would make sense for us to attend PTO meetings when we have critical information that we want to push out. But I don't, in my personal opinion, and I've been saying this for years, like the welcome to the PTO beginning of the year coffee where you're talking about the gift fundraiser, I'm not necessarily sure board members need to be at that one. That's just my opinion, and I know people have disagreed with me about that, but that might be an approach to take away some of the burden of responsibility of attending so many things. Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yeah, and the advocacy committee is actually meeting next week. And this is one of our agenda items, is for the committee members to sort of, discuss a way, maybe perhaps, making some changes. So.
Mrs. McEwen?
A number of years ago when I was chairing the advocacy committee and we were having this same problem, we kind of came to the consensus that we would try to prioritize the PTO meetings where it was more important that we be there. And it worked to varying degrees with different schools and the PTOs. Unfortunately, sometimes we didn't go to a meeting, and then something really hot issue came up, and we wished we had been there, and then other times we went, and there wasn't that much going on that we could have probably skipped. So it was difficult. I mean, I think it's something that that would have to be discussed with the PTO presidents to make sure they understood. And it's a lot of work for the chair of the advocacy committee to check in with them all the time, because they don't always know what's going to be coming up at their meeting. They might just find out the week before that everyone at their school is upset about something or other, and they don't know that months in advance. So it's not that simple to prioritize, because I tried it once for a year, and it was interesting. But one thing that was interesting when I was down at school boards, one of the sessions I went to, there was a number of board members from districts where everybody on their board was required to attend different meetings. It was just part of being on the board, including PTO meetings and school events. And so everybody had to go to like a concert, at least one concert or play, and everyone had to go, like a fine arts performance. So everyone had to go to, a certain number of sports events and things like that. So I thought that was interesting. I think a lot of us already are at a lot of those events, and I'm certainly not trying to sign up for extra ones for myself of those events. But I think for the PTO meetings, we could maybe talk about having a schedule so that it's not just the advocacy committee, because I think that people learn a lot at those meetings. Board members do.
Yeah. Mrs. Richmond?
Well, as the chair of advocacy, I just want to say I love attending the PTO meetings. I find them incredibly informative. I love actually really going to all of them. It's the additional stuff and all the additional committees. I really like going to the township committee meetings. I go pretty regularly. I probably missed a few here and there. And that's on me. It's just, I think that when we go forward, when we're talking board reorg, you have to take into account that certain people are going to a lot more extra committee meetings. I like being on SEL, but that has somehow snowballed into 2 meetings a month sometimes for a long time. So I just think that it just has to be balanced better so that, there aren't 2 board members going to 100 meetings a year. Because I bet if we counted them up between 2 of us, it's been probably close to that. So I just think, I would love for people to step up, but it has to be just worked out and balanced better. Because there are some people not going to anything except for board meetings and 1 meeting a month or 2 meetings a month, and it's not right.
Ouch.
I didn't say any names.
Is there a way to do, I'm relatively new, right? So, but I also work, but is there like a sign-up genius type of thing that can happen? Where you have all the meetings that need to be gone to, and then you can sign up for them, and so at least you have it, maybe, covered somehow? So that,
Karen publishes it.
Right.
At the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
I know it's online.
Yeah, no one ever tells me until the day before, so it's hard to,
So that if there's
it's
some
hard
way that
to
we could,
know.
or like a Google Doc, I don't know, something where you can put your name down, and you're just like, oh, there's 4 spots. But,
Yeah.
but and then a month in advance, so I'm bad with the calendar, just FYI. So you had to tell me a lot of times that there's meetings, but, if there's somewhere we can sign up, actually physically sign your name so that everyone can see it, so that you can say, okay, so there's 4 people at this meeting, so no one else can go, or there's only 2 here, more people have to do that. Would that work? Or is that something that was tried and didn't work?
Well, we can talk about this at advocacy.
Yeah, I
more.
like that idea of automating the process, because that takes some of the burden off of you as far as scheduling, if people can go online and sign up. But and we'll talk about this, if you sign up and commit to something, it's not Mrs. Richmond's responsibility to find someone else if you can't go. It's your responsibility to find someone else.
Okay.
And, maybe we have some minimum obligations for every single board member for attendance at the meetings to help share the burden. Okay. Mrs. Gray?
At the risk of negating some of what was just said, I just don't think it's the end of the world if we end up in a situation where we don't have a board member at a particular meeting. I was a PTO president for 4 consecutive years before this notion existed. We got by, I promise. I promise. And we're doing a lot of work. At least a healthy share of us are doing a lot of work. So if we're not going to get parity on this, I don't think we need to jump through hoops to make it full coverage if something arises. I think it's an excellent idea to go to a sign of genius type of approach.
Yeah, but if it's not filled in, I mean, yeah, it's not the end of the world. It's just that you can see
Right.
what's been left off, what needs to, you can see what's being dropped, what's not being covered that may need more, or a couple of things can just be, written off, I guess, kind of, if you can't get coverage.
Is there any other comments on this topic? Are there any other topics for board forum? Mr. Byrne?
Yes, I have a couple items. One, the quarry development, I think that's a brand-new program. I heard nothing about it before. There was an over 55 community suggested. I forget how many were going to be occupied there. That was, I thought, a great idea. Of course, I'm biased. And the other one was about 25 homes.
40.
Was it 40?
40.
So this whole thing is brand new. I have not heard a thing about it until this week. So if the board's been participating in that for a year, that's back to my comments on committees.
No.
Okay, let me clarify that. The Township Committee just released the information on the plan last week. They agreed only to meet with our Chair of Advocacy, Mrs. Richmond, and the board president, myself, on the condition that we did not share the information until it was released publicly. Now, I am of the opinion, better for two of us to know the information and prepare Mr. Markarian ahead of time than no one knowing the information, because we can't share with everyone. So that is why we chose to meet and collect the information. Now that the information is public, we're discussing it openly.
So the board was not participating.
Not-
That was my point.
Yeah, we were told that the board could
Because
not
I
participate.
think that's a classic example of a government organization doing stuff on the side that came out of nowhere. I don't think it's been talked about at all, and it's so radically different. So I'm criticizing the Township Committee.
Wasn't this just a couple days before they released it you're talking about? You didn't know anything until then, right?
Yeah, we met with them like 3 days before they released the
Right.
information publicly. And when we met with them a year ago, it was to say, we know you are planning to redevelop the quarry, and we know you're going to be held accountable for COA obligations, which is the low-income housing. And we want to tell you what the issues are going to be. We want to tell you it's going to impact the number of students in our school. We want to tell you it's going to
Well, you
impact.
weren't representing the full board, you were representing yourselves.
Well, we were actually representing the advocacy committee, which we sit on, which the entire board you included appointed us to.
That's okay, there's no feedback to the rest of the board, and that's my criticism. Let me come back to advocacy committee and the township committee. I don't remember anything ever coming out of either one of those committees that the full board was told anything about. That here's something that has to be fixed. I do know that topics at the advocacy committee are talked about that the full board has not talked about. Because the members of the advocacy committee are part of some specialized committees on the board. I think that I might learn something by going to the advocacy committee.
You actually have been part of the advocacy committee last year.
Well, I
And
was a
attended
member
it.
2 or 3 years ago, and I didn't even go, but
Exactly. You
But I'm
can't
just-
complain when
I'm
other
just
people
commenting.
are participating in the
I
committee
report out
when you
every
had the
month.
opportunity to serve on it and didn't show up.
my comments are that I think they ought to come to the full board, again, full board, not committees, because the public and all of us should be benefiting from those
Well,
comments.
if you'll recall, Mr. Byrne, the primary responsibility of the advocacy committee, and maybe you don't recall because it was a couple years ago, we meet with the PTO presidents monthly. So we can't do it in a full board forum because the PTO presidents a lot of them are elementary school PTO presidents. They're only available during the school day, and we traditionally meet on a Monday morning because that's when the PTO presidents are available to meet with us. Mrs. Richmond?
And I do report out every month what we talk about at these meetings. Every single month, I talk about all the issues that we talk
I don't
about.
remember any of them.
You know what?
Yeah.
The board meetings are on a videotape, and you are welcome to look, because
so
I am on it every month.
That's my comment on those two items. The last item was, I hope at the next meeting, we're going to talk about the technology, because I've been quite amazed at what's happened to the schools and the teacher interaction with the students and things. And I hope we're going to have a full discussion whenever that comes to the table, not just at the committee level.
I know it is scheduled for a meeting. Do you remember which date, Mr. Mercuri? It's the end of November meeting.
Good. That's it.
Any other issues for board forum? No? Might anyone be interested in making a motion for adjournment? Dr. Dunton, second Mrs. Wooldridge. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thanks for coming out.
Anybody want a candy bar? No, thanks.